facilitating women's ability to get knowledge from our learned brothers, that we have this session here for sisters only, because often I think we all feel that they are dominated by the brothers who crowd around. Both of these speakers, Dr. Jamal Badawi and Dr. Muzammil Siddiqui, are well known, so I'll just dispense with the introductions and let them get to answering questions. We will take both written and spoken questions, as I said. I see they sort of blocked the mic. I was hoping we could have maybe a line at the mic if they can He'll open it. Okay, so then if you have an oral question, it would be best if you could line up at the mic so that it'll be audible to everybody. Jazakumullah khairan. And we'll start with Jamal Badawi. Thank you. Oh. Okay, we'll start with Muzammil then.
Can you move the mic?
Yes.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulih al-Kareem. Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Dear sisters in Islam, our dear brother Jamal Badawi is here, and I wanted very much that he speak and begin, but he is very kind. He asked me to say a few words, so I just want to say a few words in the beginning, and then also I have a question that I will inshallah answer. The first is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you, sisters, a great responsibility. And I just want to remind myself and remind you that the responsibility of the woman is not any less than the responsibility of men, both in terms of your own commitment to Allah, your own commitment to your deen, but at the same time also raising the generation of Muslims who are committed to Islam, who have the love of Allah and who have the love of Prophet Muhammad in their heart. This is a great responsibility to raise the new generation of Muslims in this society, the society that has a lot of corruption, society has a lot of things that will turn them away from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So please, sisters, remember your great responsibility, and that is no one else can do it better than you. And also remember that you have another mission, you have another responsibility, that is to spread the message of Islam to others. Dawah is not only the job of men, dawah is also the job of women. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Al-mu'minuna wal-mu'minat ba'duhum awliya'u ba'd ya'muruna bil-ma'ruf wa yanhawna 'anil munkar. The believing men and the believing women, they are the supporters of each other. They command what is right and they forbid what is wrong. Commanding right and forbidding wrong, amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, is the wajib. It is an obligation of every male and every female. So it is your responsibility, and for that you have to increase your knowledge. You also have to increase your amal, your action, your commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and your commitment to Allah's religion, Allah's teachings. These are just few remarks to remind. Innama zikra tanfa'ul mu'minin, because the reminding helps the believers. Now I'd like to take the first question, and it is a good question because it establishes the methodology. The question is, please explain the relationship between fiqh and hadith. Hadith is the word that means the statement, narration, report. But when we refer to word hadith as a technical term, it means the statement of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Whatever the Prophet ﷺ said or did, or things that happen in his presence and he approved of them. Also hadith may include the description of the Prophet ﷺ about his dress, about his eating habit, about his walking, and all this sifatun Nabi ﷺ. Hadith may include that. So hadith is the report, it is the narration. Hadith has, there are different kind of hadith. Some of the reports are very authentic, some of the reports are not that authentic. So the scholars, they distinguish between the authentic hadith and the weak hadith. Muslims are obliged, Muslim men and women, they are obliged to follow the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ as they are obliged to follow the Quran. Ma atakum ar-rasulu fakhudhuh. Quran says that whatever the Prophet gives you, you take it. So Rasulullah ﷺ's mission was to explain the Quran, and he explained the Quran through his words and through his actions. Hadith contains that. So Quran and the Hadith, these are the two main sources of Islam. These are the two basic sources of Islam. Now Quran has many things, as well as Hadith has many things. Quran has explanation, the stories of the previous people, of the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many prophets' names are mentioned and their stories are mentioned. Quran also has the description of the heaven and the hell. Quran also has the description about Allah and His sifat, Allah and His asma, and many other things about that. But then at the same time, Quran also has ahkam, which are called rules, and hadith of the Prophet ﷺ explain those ahkam. The area that emphasizes or that specializes with the ahkam, how to perform the prayers, how to fast, how to pay your zakat, how to perform the hajj, the matters related to marriage and divorce, the matters related to the economics, business dealings, the matters related to handling of the criminals in the society, hudud, and many other things. All of this is the area of fiqh. The word fiqh means understanding. Understanding of the sources in order to draw the laws from those sources. So fiqh is the work of the human beings. Fiqh is not revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fiqh is the work of the ulama, of the ai such as Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and many others. So this is the work of the human beings. On this work, they did, alhamdulillah, a great job. We have to be thankful to them. We recognize their effort, their greatness. But there is a great scope in the fiqh for more. Because the new situations come, the new issues come, and you always have ijtihad. You always have new issues and new answers. So fiqh is an ever-growing thing. Quran and hadith, you cannot make more chapters in the Quran, for example. You cannot make a hadith. Hadith is that which the Prophet ﷺ said and did, and is reported. So no new hadith can be made. No new chapter in the Quran can be written. Quran is complete. But fiqh is an ever-growing process. It's a process of understanding and implementation of what is in the Quran and what is in the Hadith in terms of the rules, the regulations, the values that we have to observe in our life.
Assalamu alaikum. I have a next batch of 3 short, or reasonably short questions. One basically say, if a brother is married to 2 wives, can he sleep with both of them, fondling one while the other one is looking away? The answer is definitely no. Because the basic rule, as the Prophet ﷺ taught, is that a man should not see the private part of another man, and a woman should not see the private part of another woman. So it's prohibited for both sexes even to have this, even within the same sex. And I think it's cruel and inappropriate to do this. If a person is married to more than one wife, then the privacy for each one of them should be respected, and equality in terms of treatment and spending time with them, not only in bed, I mean time with them, period. And spending also on the household needs should be equivalent. So the answer is definitely no. It's not right, it's un-Islamic, it's cruel. The second question is a bit frank, and I hope again you don't mind when we address issues like that. The question is whether oral sex is permissible in Islam or not. I must say first of all that we have to be clear on the terms we use, because some people might be using that term to refer to a sort of approach that may substitute actually for the actual intimate husband-wife type of relationship that is up to the fulfillment. Obviously, this is contrary to the objective of Sharia, which intends to satisfy both sides to the marital relationship in order to preserve their chastity and achieve the permissible pleasure permitted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If it is meant, however, by this a sort of foreplay, and I think we all understand what that means, then there is no evidence that one can offer to say definitively it is haram or unlawful, as the relationship between husband and wife is open except for certain things that Allah has conclusively forbidden. But otherwise, whatever other means they're using to please each other, in itself cannot be said to be haram. It is a matter that might relate a great deal to the cultural orientation, the taste, acceptability or rejection or abhorrence even in some cultures or some subculture. Some people might raise the issue of cleanliness or the dignity of the human mouth, but these are issues while one can respect people's views on that, one cannot honestly say that there is evidence to say that it is haram in itself. The third question is also one that we can answer briefly, even though it could be a subject of a whole topic by itself. And the question basically is about cohabitation with, quote, with a slave girl. I must say in the first place that we should not fall into the trap that some of the opponents of Islam are putting for us, and we just walk right into it. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught us to avoid dwelling too much on issues that are basically academic issues and not realistic issues. And to me, the question of slaves in general, whether a slave man or a slave woman, is within the structure of Islam in the 20th century totally irrelevant. It is a dead topic, number one. Number two, if we were to answer the question also, yes, no problem. I must say first of all that slavery existed, was not created by Islam. It existed before Islam, and Islam actually came to deal with it and smoothly deal with the situation so that it would eventually end. And there are two pronged strategy that was used in Islamic Sharia. The first is to make sure that all new sources of slavery is totally dried out. So you work on both ways. You dry the sources and then deal with those who are still there, so that in a couple of generations it could easily finish. By drying the source, the Prophet ﷺ clearly said that among those who will not enter into paradise is one who takes a free person and sells him, or means her, in slavery. And since the assumption, as Sayyidina Umar explained, since when did you enslave people when their mother gave birth to them free? Every human being is born free. It means then that kidnapping people, putting them on ships or whatever, whether it's done by anyone claiming to be of this religion, that whoever does that is violating the very clear and explicit teaching of the Prophet ﷺ. Even the exception that some jurists refer to, the case of captives in war, even that in itself is academic now. Because when we see the behavior of the Prophet ﷺ and Sahaba, you find that by and large they freed those captives of war either as an act of charity or ransom. Ransom here could be defined also as exchange of slave or war prisoners with the enemy. In fact, one great example was given by the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba when he married Juwayriyah, that in fact as a result of marrying that woman who came from a Jewish background, the Sahaba freed 100 women war captive, because they said, how could we have the relatives of our Prophet, the in-laws, as our captives? Now, giving the 20th century, and that's my point again, it's an academic question. In the 20th century, where there is all kind of agreements of exchange of prisoners, even among the most ardent enemies, the issue is dead. Secondly, the second prong is to positively even deal with the people who are at present or at the time of revelation of the Quran in slavery. And that took a number of ways. Number one was to free them spiritually and in the human level, to say that there is no slave and servant and master, only there is one master, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we are all slaves of Allah. And that went a long way, so that a slave, so-called, is no longer a slave in the traditional sense, a thing, a property, but a human being. Secondly, it provided for the legal protection to give teeth to the law. As the Prophet ﷺ say, anyone who kills a slave, we will kill him. Anyone who cuts his nose or castrate him, we will do the same thing to him. So it provided the legal protection to become a human being. Thirdly, the humane and kind treatment that transformed those slaves into actually what we call today domestic servant, live-in servant. The Prophet ﷺ say, if one of you have one of them, don't tell him my slave boy or my slave girl, but let's say my son and my daughter, fataya wa fatati, my son and my daughter. He says you should feed him of what he eats, clothe him of what he clothes himself, and never charge them with any work beyond their ability, and if he does, you should give them a hand in that work. Then it went one step beyond that to provide for actual freedom if they wish to have that freedom. First, by indicating that freeing a slave is one thing to free our own necks in the day of judgment. فَكُّ رَقَبَةٍ. And who does not need to liberate his neck in the day of judgment? But some people who were not motivated and moved enough by this, came another aspect. By providing for kaffara, atonement for certain sins requires, as number one priority, freeing a person in bondage. And then it went beyond that, as the evolution, as you know, tashri'ah or sharia came in gradual steps so that people can move without having quick negative reaction that could backfire. Then another stage came in where the sharia provided for the system known as mukataba, which means that any person in bondage who feel that he or she wishes to be independent, they are ready to face the world independently, have every right to do this. All they have to do is to have a contract with their so-called former master to compensate him. Maybe that's the money that they're holding the people from freeing them. I'll compensate you for what you paid for me. Once they agree on the amount, from that moment on, by the text of the Quran, the person in bondage would be entitled for zakah, one of the legitimate expenditure of zakah, until they gain their freedom. So like I said earlier, I could have simply answered in 1 second and say the issue is academic and dead. I don't want anyone to get the notion that, oh, he's trying to sweep the answer under the floor. No, we can face it and discuss it even in more detail. But like I say, dwelling more than that really is basically academic.
Question: is it okay for a woman on her menses to recite Quran from memory in a regular voice? Is it also okay for the same sister to touch the outside cover of the Quran and turn the pages with a pencil? Basic issue is that when a woman is on her menses, she is not in tahara. And tahara is required for prayers. Tahara is required also for touching the Quran. Because there is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that is, no one should touch the mushaf except who is the person who is tahir. And this has been interpreted by the fuqaha that during the menses a woman should not touch the mushaf, the copy of the Quran. And if she wants to read the Quran from her memory, she is allowed to do so. She can also make any other zikr that is allowed. But touching the Quran, touching the mushaf and reading by touching the mushaf, that is not allowed. Also, if she is a teacher and she is teaching a classroom, then she can do that. She can have something, a cover on her hand, or she can use a pointer or a pencil. By that she can do that. So she is in a sense not totally barred from the reading of the Quran or from the teaching of the Quran, but at the same time she is giving some respect and some respect to the sacredness of the mushaf. This is again a matter on which we have to follow the nas, the actual text, the actual order of the Prophet ﷺ, and we cannot take it beyond that. For example, some people ask me also about what about touching a cassette tape in which there is a Quran, or what about touching a record, that is where there is the voice of the Quran, the chanting of the Quran is put there. Can we touch those things? No, we cannot take those beyond that, because if you take it beyond that, then there is also question may come, what about touching a hafiz during that time? So this is we have to just take it to the text itself. That is just the mushaf, it is forbidden and one cannot do that. Of course, you can read the Quran from your memory, and if you have to teach, if you have to look at it, or if you have to carry it, then you can have a glove or something else on your hand.
We have an announcement. If Alicia Abu Nahia is here, her child apparently is quite upset in the babysitting area, and they would like for her to come. Now, sister, the mic.
Assalamu alaikum. Brothers, it's wonderful to have you both here to answer our questions. In the interest of time, I could speak volumes on our problems, but in the interest of time, I would stick just to two things. One is, what is Islamic role on integration of men and women? The reason I ask that is because Islam is usually attacked through women. They attack our Muslim women to attack Islam. And then they talk about polygamy, because women have a right to have 4 wives, and then they talk about 2 witnesses as opposed to 1 when it comes to women. And then they talk about our our segregation, that we have to have separate lives, and then they talk about our wearing veils and our head covers, and there has been a lot of criticism poured on Islam through Muslim women's treatment of Islam. Those who really want to be critical about it. So I was wondering if there was room for integration for men and women in Islam at all, and if there was, wouldn't this be a dynamic community to set that up? I know a lot has been done, but I still think it's not a rule, it's an exception, integration. We are having this meeting which gives us an opportunity to talk about issues which are solely for women. And the other question I have is, in fact, you see, Muslim women are supposed to be modest, dress modestly, not attract men. I was wondering if, you see, attractiveness could also be confidence, intellect, and stuff like that. Is that part of the reason that Muslim women shy away, because there are other dimensions to one's being desirable and attractive? And
actually, you raised a gamut of questions that will take an hour to answer. What I could do is maybe to just go very quickly and possibly even superficially in answering your concerns. I think the major point that you raised really is the question of what you call the integration between men and women. I'd like to call it participation of men and women in the affairs of the Muslim Ummah. In answering that question, as I inshallah will be indicating in the presentation tomorrow, I think it's tomorrow, with women in the mosque, we have to make a clear distinction between the text that we find in the Quran and in the sound hadith, the practice of the Prophet ﷺ and early Sahaba on one hand, and the cultural practices of Muslims in different parts of the Muslim world and in different times. And I think the line should be drawn quite sharply there. As far as the evidence of participation of men and women within certain limits, and I speak about those limits very briefly also, we find overwhelming evidence in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. You will find, especially in the two primary sources of hadith, in Bukhari and Muslim, dozens and dozens of ahadith indicating that men and women were together in prayers, in education, in the battlefield, in even social functions, in visitation of the sick. There is evidence of all of this in sound hadith. But within the Islamic etiquette, proper Islamic attire, and I'll come to that in response to your question about hijab, in proper Islamic attire, proper Islamic behavior, and avoiding too much closeness if it is not necessary. Like in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, there were separate doors. But when the necessity arose and there was some legitimate needs for participation in the affairs of the Muslim Ummah, there was a little bit of relaxation of that, but within also the basic boundary of Islam. The fact that some Muslims today go to one extreme of westernization and mixing like other people do without any restriction is wrong, even if it happens in masjid, and it does happen in masjids. And the fact that some other Muslims go to the other extreme and say women are not welcomed in the mosque, if they are, they have to be relegated to the most unattractive room or to have a wall or curtain, this is not the case with the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. So the adab, behavior, good, clean thoughts, clean behavior were not a handicap at all of Muslim men and women participating hand in hand. And tell me, how could you separate them in the battlefield, as we find in Bukhari? How do you have complete separation in the battlefield when they have to touch the injured, deal with them, and carry the dead, and provide services and help to the fighters? There's no question in my mind, provided those limits. On the question of polygamy, I think it is quite hypocritical for some critics of Islam to criticize Islam on the ground of polygamy. I'm not discussing that in detail. You will find in Album 4 in the Islamic Teaching Series there is detailed discussion of this. There are many good books written on that. But usually, to get a quick answer, say, which one is more humane and moral? To claim to have one wife and go around with 15 sweethearts without any protection for her or her children, or to have a second legitimate wife in the fullness of the day with the same right, with the same legitimacy, with the clean type of relationship and protection and legitimacy of their children? Number one. Number two, ask another question, and I'll move to another topic after that, because like I say, each of these questions could be an hour in itself. In Afghanistan today, you have a dilemma of 1.5 million people martyred, leaving behind many widows, young girls in marriageable age, and orphans. Which one is more humane and good for the woman herself? For one who came from the battlefield and Allah gave him extension in his life, to get married to 1, 2, 3, or even 4 of the widows of his brothers who fell before him to defend Islam, look after them, give them the warmth of a home, the warmth of a marital relationship, a father figure to look after the children, or to shut them off in some charitable building or an institution and give them a charity. Which one is more humane and consistent with the fitrah? That's why Islam is Deenul Fitrah. We should never apologize for polygamy. We should never say that polygamy was just at one time in history. That's not valid. It is valid, was valid yesterday, it is valid today, it is valid tomorrow. Allah knows best that in many cases it is a much more humane and clean solution to problems that may arise from time to time to society. But you tell me some people abuse that? Fine, anything can be abused. If there is any abuse, there is no law in the world, religious or otherwise, that can restrain some dishonest person from abusing a concession. And Islam does not require it, by the way. Islam is the only religion known to me, including Abrahamic faiths like Judaism and Christianity. Islam is the only one that specifically specified in its scriptures limitation on the number of wives and the demands of justice. It is not in the Bible, it's not in the Old Testament, it's not in the New Testament. Jesus, peace be upon him, never said anything against polygamy. Martin Luther himself kept claiming that God did not forbid it. Most Israelite prophets were polygamous prophets. I think some people use different standards when they try to judge Islam. But any time a finger is pointed to someone, 4 other fingers are pointed to the person, at least 3, I should say. Number 3, question of witness, very briefly. I know this is an issue again where you have to distinguish between the text of the Quran and interpretation of scholars. There are 3 categories of ayat in the Quran about witness. Some of them do not specify the number of men or women, and this is the majority. Some of them, like in Surah An-Nur, equates the witness of man and women, like the case of mula'ana, equate it exactly on equal footing. And one ayah in the Quran requires 2 men witness, or 1 man or 2 women, and that is the ayah dealing with financial dealings. And the ayah explained the reason, so that if one of them get confused, the other would remind her. Not that the women are the ones who get confused, because men can also get confused, but because it's assumed that in an ideal Islamic society, women will value so much, and the society itself will value their function as a mother and a wife, and most likely women would have relatively, there could be exception, less experience in financial dealing and financial jargon, and since the purpose is to protect the rights of parties, the collaboration of another witness is helpful to establish justice. Yet the question is open before jurists even, and in Islamic law it is well known that the main criteria for the judge is to examine a particular case within these broad principles. And the question arises here, could the judge, if the woman that is giving witness is a Harvard Business School graduate, vis-a-vis a man who doesn't know what he's talking about, whether in that particular case he could accept her witness on equal footing? This is a matter again that could be open, because the criteria for judgment for jurisprudential juristic procedures is to ascertaining the rights of people, and this is an issue that is still open. On the question of veil, I'd like to distinguish between proper Islamic attire and veil, because people sometimes understand veil in a sense that women should not have any face-to-face interaction with men, which is false. It was a special requirement for the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. If somebody wants to follow their suit, fine, but it's not a requirement, and great Sahabi women did not follow that after this ayah was revealed. It's a special precaution because they are the mothers of believers. Some people take the word veil to mean covering of the face, and this is an issue of dispute between Muslim jurists. I'm personally inclined to the opinion that say that the covering of the face is not requirement, but I would respect a sister that preferred to take the other opinion. But if it's meant the proper Islamic hijab, yes, it is a requirement of every Muslim woman. This is not an opinion imposed by any man on women. It is in the word of Allah, it is in the revelation given to the Prophet ﷺ in hadith, and you find lots of evidence for that. There is a little booklet you can obtain. It's called Muslim Woman Dress in the Quran and Sunnah. It's covered in moral teaching in the tapes, and lots of information are available. Basically, that the whole body should be covered except for the face and hand. And it says face, not hair. The face and hands, provided that the material is not light to show the color of the skin or tight to describe the shape of the body. And a Muslim woman should be proud of that. In fact, when the question of attractiveness is raised, no, there is no text that I know of in Sharia that says that this in order to make the woman less attractive. A woman who observes Islamic hijab does not mean that she has to be clumsy. No, that's not the purpose. Nor not to be attractive, because you're quite right. Attractiveness is also a character. It's not just the physical beauty. It's the piety is attraction. Intellect and intelligence is an attraction. Personality is an attraction. Nowhere in the Quran say that you shouldn't be attractive. But in fact, the hijab reduces attractiveness to the physical body, to the sexual aspect of woman, so that the man dealing with her would be forced to respect her and look at the other attractive issues of personality, spirituality, and intellect. The woman should be grateful to Allah that He required that.
We have a couple of questions that relate to a similar topic and a follow-up question on the Quran, and then I'll go to the mic. Brother Badawi, they're asking about jewelry. Whether the head covering should cover
What is the first question?
Jewels.
or whether it's adequate to have loose clothing with a scarf tied like this.
Whether it's required to cover the bosom?
Whether the scarf itself has to go
Okay.
down over the bosom, so whether it's
Okay.
okay to have a loose dress. And lastly is why is makeup against Islam? Lipstick.
Makeup?
Makeup.
Okay.
So those all relate to the hijab issue.
All right. Okay. Even though it would have been better to rotate, you want to take some questions, but just to rotate a little. Just since, Brother Muzammil turned, so maybe I'll defer to him and at least some of this question. If I have a humble comment, I'll add it later.
Well, generally, as Brother Jamal mentioned, that the emphasis is on not on the attraction of the body, but rather on the attraction of the personality. So when the women are going in public, in the mixed gathering, it is important that they should wear that kind of a dress or that kind of appearance that would not attract only to the physical side of their personality, but they should be looked at as persons in their own dignity, in their own integrity, in their own intellect, and all the other aspects of the human being that should be there. For this reason, again, one doesn't have to be clumsy, one doesn't have to look ugly, but one should not come out, as number of ahadith emphasize that point, that wearing perfume that is very attractive perfume, that should be avoided when you are going in public. Cosmetics, makeup, that will very often that will just attract the eyes only to the person, to the physical aspect. Those should be avoided. But one should look clean, one should look nice, and as a person. So those things are certainly good. But if there is a women gathering, when the women are gathering among themselves, yes, they have a right to wear whatever is, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also has given them the right to beautify themselves, has also given them the right to wear the jewels. The jewelry is for them. Halalun li nisa'i ummati wa haramun ala rijaliha. That the Prophet ﷺ mentioned about the gold, that this is halal, this is good, allowed for the women of my ummah, and it is haram for the men. So that means it is the right of the women to wear gold. It is the right of the women to wear the jewelry. But this is when they are in their own gatherings among themselves, so that they are not attracting to their physical aspect, to their just personal beauty, the physical part of their life. They are not doing that to women, to men. Something, a string of hair come out, or something that is not intentional, I don't think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to hold you responsible for that. But one should try to wear proper dress, one should try to wear the proper hijab that is necessary. It is not to put a special burden upon you, but it is rather to protect you, because the Quran says very clearly, فَلَا يُؤْذَيْنَ, so that say to the believing women that they should wear those things so that they will not be harmed, they will not be molested. That is the whole purpose, that is the whole value, that's why this rule is given. So remember those things, that this is only for your own protection, It is for your own good that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given this rule. Again, there is a lot of scope within this, the boundaries. One has to see that how one should observe these rules in a setup, especially when you are going to the mosque, when you are attending meetings where the men are also around, then those things should be observed. Otherwise, when the women are in their own privacy, in their women gathering, then they are allowed to show their beauty to each other, and especially in their homes, to their husbands, to their father, brother, sons, and other maharim, those who are mahram to them, they are allowed to show their beauty.
As I said, we had a follow-up question on the Quran issue also about the etiquette of reading Quran, whether the hair should be covered, and if she can read aloud. And I assume that means both at home and in mixed gatherings. And also are the places where you can or cannot put the Quran.
If a woman is reading the Quran inside her home, it is not required that she should cover her hair. This is not required for the reading of the Quran. For prayer, yes. But for reading of the Quran, it is not required. Tahara is certainly required. She should be tahir. There is another thing which we call adab, the manner. One thing is we are talking about what is halal and what is haram. When I said about not touching the Quran when a woman is in her menses, we are talking not about something just a matter of adab, but it is a nas, it is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. According to that, a woman is not allowed to touch the mushaf by her hand during the menses. But there is another thing which is called the respect and the adab. That is, when you read the Quran, then you should be in a proper dress, you should be in a proper position, and because the tilawah has its own adab, tilawah has its own manners and etiquettes. For this purpose, people emphasize that you should be properly dressed, you should cover your hair, you should sit down towards the qibla, facing the towards qibla. All of these things, these manners have been taught. We are taught these things from our childhood. Don't turn your feet towards the Quran, keep the Quran elevated. All of these things, these are the rules that are given so that one is giving respect to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it is not, these are things you cannot say that these are haram. Suppose my foot is towards the Quran, that means it's not haram. Suppose I am sitting in a place, the Quran is down and I am sitting on a higher place, it is not haram, but you should not do that. You should avoid that, because the book of God has to be respected, has to be elevated.
I have another batch of questions, and as you notice, I try to put it in a very brief way, so I hope it would not be misleading because of brevity, but I'd like really that we can accommodate as many as possible of these questions, if not all of them. Two related questions that I'd like to integrate. Can a woman give money to her relatives without the knowledge and or approval of her husband if that comes from her own money, her property or job? The answer is definitely yes. The earning of a woman or her wealth is entirely her property, and she can dispose with it in any way she likes without the permission of anyone, including the husband. Is it? Pardon me? Yeah, actually it's better to do that. better only for the sake of understanding. But in the meantime, there is no legal obligation on her to do this. And if the husband, for example, is too stingy and she's paying, maybe in that case it's better not to tell. Or else why have problems anyway? Is it a major sin to enforce that the husband force his wife on sex anytime? Well, first of all, it is true that there are ahadith that discourage a wife from trying to deprive her husband from having, access to her. But in the meantime, one cannot take a text of Sharia alone out of context of other texts. Because other text in the Quran and Sunnah says that when you approach your wife, you don't just go like one hadith say, like animals go on each other. And one should introduce. Even the Quran, it says, وَقَدِّمُوا لِأَنفُسِكُمْ, introduce for yourself. Which means that if a wife is not ready, or tired, or sick, even, I'm not talking about the legal prohibition during period, that means that a sensible Muslim husband would not say, all right, you're just like anything available to me at any time. One would have to keep in mind also these circumstances. So I understand humbly the spirit of that hadith, that even if the wife does not really desire so much, but her husband really is in great need, it would not be a good idea to deprive him, because that might hurt her own future if she keep repeating that, and then he might start flirting or doing something that is wrong. The idea is not to make a woman just like a piece of furniture available at any time. There is the sense emphasized also in the Quran and Sunnah. On the other hand, some people ask, why not the reverse? Well, the reverse is understood. The reverse is not exactly equivalent, because if a wife really needs her husband, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has endowed her with all kind of means and qualification to make him submit. If the wife is, two questions, related ones, about the concept of qawama, or the leadership of the husband. What does it mean? What are the limitations? Does he require her to serve him at any time or to do any part of the housework? And so on. Basically, the concept of qawama has been grossly mistranslated sometimes. Some people translate it, men are in charge of women. That sounds like the military. But qawwamuna actually, as many scholars interpret that, qa'imun, that they stand up for the responsibility of maintenance, of protection, and general leadership of the family. Leadership. No, what does leadership mean? The Quran speaks about consultation between husband and wife. So leadership after consultation, which nobody would frown about. Even a men community would have to have some leadership, order and discipline in the family, but not dictatorship. There are two qualifications for that obedience as well. One is that one cannot obey a husband if he tells us to do something contrary to what Allah says or His Prophet. لا طاعة لمخلوق في معصية الخالق. Secondly, as the Quran and Sunnah also indicate, إنما الطاعة في المعروف, obedience in something that is reasonable, even if it's not معصية, if it's not disobedience. If a husband is capricious and asks his wife to do something that's really too much or unreasonable, uncustomary, she does not have necessarily to obey him, but she should try to explain to him. And one further question, but I would recommend that you listen to that very carefully, or otherwise the brothers would say that you're instigating our wives against us. Can she serve him? Some jurists actually said that serving the husband even is not part of the marital contract. They are of that opinion. However, I must hasten to say, I'm afraid some brothers will be, I must hasten to say that if we look at the spirit of Sharia in the Quran, when it says that husband and wife should live with each other in ma'ruf, in fairness and justice, one would expect that if the wife, for example, is not working outside of the house, it would be unfair for her to expect that her husband do all the homework and say, oh, Brother Jamal said the wife doesn't have to serve her husband. No, that's a misquotation. And by the way, some of misquotations go around this country, by the way, so I have to be careful. But alhamdulillah, it's taped, so you can refer to it. But of course, I must say in addition to this also, that it depends also on the financial ability. Some jurists would say that if the wife comes from a rich family, for example, where she used to be served, and the husband is able to do that, then he would have an obligation, not necessarily legal, but a moral obligation to provide help for her. There are two more questions. One of them might take a little more time, but maybe since I'm taking a batch at the time, I'll take this one, and then I leave it to the chairperson to see if she wants to shift to the floor in kindness to the sister standing for a long time. And the question basically says, I heard that there is a hadith that say that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if I were to ask any human being to bow down to any other human, I would have asked the wife to bow down to her husband. Three comments. One, the word law, if, is known in Arabic language to be, you can't hear? Repeating the question? Okay, the question is that it says there is a hadith. She says, I know that there is a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said that if I were to ask any human being to make sajda or to bow to another human being, I would have asked the wife to bow down to her husband. What does that mean? And is it mutual? Could that apply to the husband as well? All right. You see, we're living in a liberation age. Tit for tat. Okay, well, first of all, my first comment, to be careful about the meaning of hadith so that it would not be misunderstood. In the Arabic language, law or if is sometimes used as the linguist call lil istihala, for something that is impossible. It's rhetorically just to make a point. Just like saying, if I were able to fly with wings, I know it would never happen. So lil istihala. It does not mean that Islam consent to any human being bowing to any other human being, only to Allah. So this is just to make a point. Number two, the hadith itself explains it, because if you complete the hadith, it says min عظم حقه عليها, because of the great demand or the great right that he has over her. So it's a matter of mutuality of rights and duties. But the question here, why specify the wife? The most eloquent answer I heard of that was not in a book I read in theology or a statement made by a alim, but I remember one time sitting in a place with some brothers and sisters, mainly from the Indo-Pakistani subcontinent. And one brother was teasing a sister, who is very learned, he's a medical doctor, and he was telling her, haha, you know, the Prophet say, if I would ask anyone, I would ask the wife to bow to her husband. She retorted in a very effective way, and she said, look, if I have a husband who's a loving husband, a kind husband, who's fulfilling his duty, I would feel like bowing down to him, except that Allah has forbidden us to bow to humans. That was enough to shut him off.
Here in the yellow. Oh, look. She's been first, yeah. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum and everybody else. I have had the good fortune to meet you before, and I know we have two very learned people up on the podium, and we have a room full of women. And I just thought I asked this lady permission to let me go ahead, and I thought it was kind of interesting to observe a room full of ladies asking questions relating to female issues of two men. I don't know if it is interesting, unfortunate, or what it is that we could not seek the knowledge and have somebody that maybe in the future ISNA could consider bringing some ladies to represent us and answer our questions on the podium. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. I was on the program committee and I just...
Let me just make a little comment on that. Actually, this is, we should take it in the spirit that which the sister has mentioned, and that is that there is a great responsibility. I started that, and you may remember that I began with that the responsibility of the women is also that they should learn, seek the knowledge, and they have to impart this knowledge to others. So you must emphasize that. It should not be just a matter of why the brothers are doing it, but it is a matter also that sisters should come forward and they should devote their time for this study. They can do that. I hope not only that in the next, in the future sessions of ISNA conferences, sisters answering the questions of sisters, but I would like to see a time when the sisters are answering the questions of brothers also. And there is nothing wrong in that. And it happened in the Islamic history. So please, sisters, you have a responsibility. You can teach men. Don't think that only men have to teach you. You should teach men.
In fact, I had a similar feeling to Brother Muzammil, and I just wanted to add even more frankly that we should not as either Muslim men or women get caught with this cult of feminism that this is only for women and this is only for men. In the early days of Islam, the Prophet ﷺ spoke to men and spoke to women. An early learned Muslim like Aisha radiallahu anha taught men and taught women. The criteria should not be the feminist criteria whether the speaker is a man or woman, but whoever Allah has bestowed knowledge on him that he or she could share with others. It doesn't matter whether it's men's session or women's session. And believe me, sister, I have to take a great deal of pain to convince some of the brothers who think in a very traditional way. Whenever we say a sister is invited in a convention or conference to give a talk, and they get uptight about that, and I take a great deal of pain and say it's not a matter of male or female, brother. That she has certain qualification, is her contribution and input is needed or not, and they say, if this is wrong, how come the Prophet ﷺ allowed Aisha and other great women to teach both men and women? So let's not think about it in terms of male or female, but as Muslim brothers and sisters.
I'd like to address that also. I was on the program committee, and when we decided to add this session with the two brothers, it was in the light of the hadith that I had mentioned earlier, that it's for access to well-known brothers and sisters. It would be acceptable to, obviously, but it was so that they would have access to the well-known brothers who are always being crowded by the men and were sought after continually to give lectures all across the country. And so that was why it was decided to have these two brothers. There's nothing wrong with having sisters, and in fact it's encouraged. there's also some fear that if we brought forward two sisters who are not as well known, there would be complaints. How come we don't have access to the brothers? I guess you can't make them all happy.
I'd like to register a complaint at this time with Dr. Badawi, and that's that there's many learned women in Islam, and many women who have come forward.
We just discussed this
Maybe we
issue.
should give the order
This
to
is
those
the
who are
issue we're
standing
discussing.
before
Yes.
that we give the
Excuse
orders.
me, sister, we have many people in
I just
line.
spoke to Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed, who's a personal friend of my husband and mine. I'm Zara Buttar, originally from Michigan, but now I just moved to Las Vegas. There were many women who asked to speak on the issues and who were denied by ISNA, only because they were afraid that they would not promote the ISNA line of thinking. Now, the Founders Day Luncheon is tomorrow. I have asked all the women who are going to attend that to not donate because ISNA will not listen to the needs of 20th century women. Now, there's so many women who are qualified in Fiqh. This is a women's meeting. Why are two men up here?
I think we just addressed that question. And I'd like to move on now to the sister who's been waiting a long time.
Okay, this I think will be changing the topic entirely. I guess I have two questions here. One of them mainly they deal with problems in many of our Islamic countries. I understand that the structure of the law of adultery, the way it's structured, virtually leaves it, correct me on anything that I am wrong on, but it virtually leaves the crime unpunishable in this lifetime. So the question I had was, many Muslim countries are accusing many people of adultery and they're going through all kinds of punishments in jail, but the problem with that is they also classify rape and related things under adultery as well, and therefore those women go through that same punishment. So I was wondering why this occurs and where, where do they get this from, basically?
Could a raped woman be punished for adultery? No. It's totally un-Islamic.
Adultery, which is known as zina, and in Islamic terminology, it is zina is either, whether the parties are married or unmarried. In both cases, it is called zina. The only thing is that the punishment is less if one of the party was unmarried. If the party was married, then the punishment is severe. Now, in the case of forced relationship, forced intercourse, which is rape, then the party that is forcing, that is the one to be punished and not the one who is forced, because there is رُفِعَ عَنْ أُمَّتِي الْخَطَأُ وَالنِّسْيَانُ وَمَا اسْتُكْرِهُ عَلَيْهِ. The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ says that from my ummah, it is the punishment is taken away if they do something by mistake or out of forgetfulness, or if they are compelled, coerced to do something. So istikrah, which is rape, if somebody is forced into that, not willing partner, but forced into that, then that person is not. The person, of course, has to prove that this was not the case, and that that person was forced into this thing, then there will be no punishment. So what if there are some Muslim countries that are doing that? I don't think that is in keeping with the spirit of the Islamic law. Anything I would like to?
Yeah, the reason I had asked that is because many Western media loves to exploit that topic, and it's been exploited in many, many newspapers around. And anyway, another thing that's also is a problem that I've come across with many non-Muslims, and I was mainly wondering on how you would address it if you were approached with a similar question. They say that in Islam, women are better, it's better for them to stay at home, which is understandable, someone has to raise the kids and take care of the family. But in this country, since we don't have extended families living in the same house, many of, after the kids are off in college or married or whatnot, and they're not living at home anymore, the problem arises, what is a lady supposed to do at home? Because many people still say that women should stay at home. And the problem being that this will lead to frivolous activities like, gossiping over telephones or whatnot. And after all, a good example of that are soap operas, and those were invented in these countries as it's the same, in response to that, people who were just sitting at home. So I was wondering how you would address that, when asked the question Islamically.
The ayah that you're referring to, sister, simply says وَقَرْنَ فِي بُيُوتِكُنَّ, but some people do not quote the remaining part of the ayah وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَ تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى. It says stay in your home and don't adorn yourself or bedizen yourself like you used to do in the days of Jahiliyyah. Which means, in fact, that if you go out without intention of displaying your beauty, it is not haram. That if you go out for legitimate need, according to the hadith of Sauda, is clearly again permissible according to the Prophet ﷺ. It does not mean that a woman cannot even take a profession if this does not contradict with her basic duty as a wife and as a mother and with the consent of her husband. For an ideal Islamic society presumes having women doctors, women nurses, and for the pleasure of our sister, women faqih, so that Brother Muzammil and I, who are overworked, can turn it to some sisters and say, Alhamdulillah, they do the job. That is presumed in an ideal Islamic society, but we're trying to strive towards that goal.
Jazakallah khair.
And I'd like to take the next person from the stand also.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, brothers. I just have a question, two questions, in fact. The first question deals with, I don't want to get back to that other issue, but we have a incident in our community where we have the brothers who are in charge of our Islamic center. It is an executive committee made up of all brothers. We are now at a position where we have the sister subcommittee, which deals with halakas and things that sisters try to do amongst other sisters. And we wish to have a sister represent themselves on the executive committee of our Islamic center. However, we have some brothers who are very opposed to this, saying that we should have a brother as a liaison who will carry the messages and our business back and forth. And I feel that we are the only ones who can represent ourselves, and I would like your opinion as to how we can address this with the brothers to help them see the light, what I feel is the light of representing ourselves and the need for doing so.
There is a whole session, sister, for tomorrow that will deal with this subject.
Inshallah, I promise you I'll be there.
That is women's role in the masjid, in the Islamic center. But to answer you very briefly, because inshallah we'll be devoting more time, myself and Brother Jamal, that is tomorrow on this subject. But to give you a brief answer on that is that from the Islamic point of view, from the Sharia point of view, there is no prohibition. Sisters can become members of the executive board. They should participate in that. The only thing that I would like to add here is that if they participate in that, it is good that they should also consult with their husband. So it is through a mutual agreement, because she is spending a lot of time in the board meetings and all of these things, and he is worried about what is going on, and he doesn't know and he has not approved of it. So it is important that there should be some consultation and some approval, mutual agreement from the family. Also, she should come in the board meetings properly dressed, this is also understood, and not stay too long after that, as many board people do, as I know. That is, after the meeting they just sit, they should spend the time in socialization. So all of those things should be avoided, but they should participate, and their views, their opinions are as valuable, as important as the views of brothers. Sometime I have suggested to various other centers that maybe if you bring sisters in the board meeting, the brothers will also behave much better, and they will discuss only the business and not the other things on which they waste a lot of time. So it is, in fact, it will be beneficial for both sides.
Jazakallah khair. One other question. There's a lot of question about foods. How far do you need to dissect foods down as to whether they're halal and haram? I'm referring to a specific booth that is here at the convention center, and I don't mean any disrespect to that booth, but there was a lot of foods on there that a lot of people in our community use and eat, referring to specific like cheeses on different snack foods, different toothpaste that apparently have some sort of alcohol in them. The brother, when I asked him why this was not permissible, he said, well, well, there's alcohol in this particular toothpaste, and it could accidentally go down your throat. And I don't know how far we need to dissect food, or what is the fiqh on this. So I don't know, I just go crazy sometimes.
Well, first of all, there are things that are quite obvious.
Right.
There are some ingredients which are clearly haram, like, for example, buying cookies or bread which state on it that it's made with lard or animal shortening, or if it says just shortening without specifying pure vegetable, then there could be also doubt about that. This I have no doubt about. Number two, the question of jello, because gelatin or jello, because that does not go through too much chemical transformation. It is basically as it is. So that again, I don't have much doubt about it. Thirdly, mouthwashes, for example, that contain alcohol, or if there is toothpaste indeed that contain alcohol, alhamdulillah, Allah has given us many other alternatives. But then there are areas that are hazy. Soap that is made of various kind of fats which may include pork. If I have the choice, I try to avoid that. But I couldn't say it's haram because it's not something eaten, and it goes through complete chemical transformation. It's no longer really oil that is in the soap. But definitely, if I know that, I should buy some other brand. And then there are some other items that are in dispute because of this process of total chemical transformation. This includes things like monoglyceride, diglyceride, and other material like that, which are used in a very, very minute amount after it has gone through very elaborate chemical transformation. And some jurists, like Dr. Qaradawi, for example, are of the opinion that this rule is there in Sharia. Grape juice is halal. If it's chemically transformed and fermented and becomes alcohol, it becomes haram. So the rule might change also with the transformation one way or the other. However, having said that, I would say, personally, what I try to do in monoglyceride and diglyceride is the least that I worry about. But when it comes, for example, to things like cheese, if the cheese has pepsin as the enzyme used, I try to avoid that, because alhamdulillah there are many cheeses available in the market that use the so-called bacterial culture. Bacterial culture, which is vegetable based, that's okay and safe. So there are areas that are definitive, there are areas that doubtful, where one should really try to avoid as much as possible, and there are areas that are much less clear, like small amount of chemical that might have had some questionable origin. Allahu Alam.
So you're saying the same thing with like toothpaste? I mean, if it accidentally,
toothpaste, I would be a little bit more careful. Toothpaste and mouthwash, I think I'd be more careful, because that is something that gets into the mouth already. So this I would keep away from. That's
does
different
intent
from
play
soap, for
any
example.
part on that?
Pardon me?
Does intent play any part on that?
No, intent does not justify something that's haram. I could not, for example, do something that's haram and say my intent is right. I mean, intent is conditional that things are not forbidden. And if I know that alcohol is forbidden and it is part of the makeup of that toothpaste, then I don't have excuse. Intent here would not play a role.
Okay. Jazakallah khair.
Well,
We'll
yeah.
take a couple of written questions and then we'll return to the speakers.
We have a
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's fair.
Can a sister, the question here, can a sister youth lead their group? For example, can she be the president of that group? Is it under the Islamic law? I don't see any reason, any prohibition for that. If she is qualified, if she has that leadership quality, and for that reason she is chosen by the group to be the president of the group, yes, she can be the group, but not only for the sake of showing the women liberation. It should be that there are some qualities are there, and those qualities are in the person. Because of that, the person is chosen. So this is not the wilaya amma. This is not a general imama of the community. It is a small group, and in the groups, any person who is most qualified, that person should be the leader of the group, regardless whether this is male or female.
There are two questions, both on fasting. I'll answer them very quickly also. One says that if a woman is pregnant, she's supposed to make up for the missed fasting of the month of Ramadan afterwards. And the question says, suppose she's breastfeeding and can fast. No problem. The overarching principle of Sharia is not to hurt the mother, not to hurt the baby, or not to hurt anyone for that matter. It is true that some jurists say that it is better for a woman to make up for the missed fasting before the next year, but this is not the only opinion. Others say she can make up any time. And I understand, I sympathize, of course, that in the early days after the child is born, the mother needs lots of fluid, and fasting would be detrimental for the production of milk for the baby. But you and I understand that once the baby grows up and begins to eat other material, the need might not be as great, and the mother might try fasting some days without really endangering the rights of the baby. But if she can't, and she feels that there is need for the continuing breastfeeding, no problem, she can delay her makeup of fasting. The other question say that suppose the period begins in the middle of the day, is the woman supposed to continue fasting or break the fast? Well, the fast is de facto broken. Once the period begins, even a few minutes before sunset, then de facto the fasting is broken. But of course, if there are other people fasting around the house, it might be better perhaps if she needs to eat or drink to do that in private. But there is no legal obligation that I know of that she should continue fasting as such. It's broken.
Assalamu alaikum. I have a very short question pertaining to who's permissible to be a mahram. I was wondering if the stepfather's daughter, if the stepfather's brother is a mahram for his brother's stepdaughter.
Stepfather's son, for example.
Okay.
Is he a mahram?
Okay, this daughter is not the real daughter of this father, but I know that he could be a mahram. But can his brother be a mahram for this girl?
No, I
brother
don't
from
think.
the father. Like if I have a stepdaughter and they have a son, and then I have a son, is he mahram for her? Mahram because he could marry her.
Yeah, he's married. Mahram, the definition of the mahram is the one whom one cannot marry
Right.
forever. That is, it's a haram to marry that person. And I don't think that, it is haram to marry that person because there is no blood relationship there. And there is, that the maharim are of four types. Either the mahram because of the nasab, because of the blood relationship, or because of the rada'ah, because of the feeding, of nursing of the child in the early childhood, or because of sihr, that is because of the in-law relationship. For example, the mother-in-law, the father-in-law, and others. These are so. This is because of the relationship of marriage. Marriage relationship has created that, and some of them are temporary type. That is the mahram, but that is again those. For example, if somebody has married a woman, then her sister during her life, he cannot marry her. So that is a temporary situation. But other three are mu'abbad, they are forever. That is, as long as a person lives, that those maharim are there. So it's a blood relationship or rada'ah, or because of the marriage. And here in this case, none of these exist. So I think that person is not mahram. And in that case, they have to observe the same rules as they have to be observed for the non-mahrams.
Okay, there's another batch of fiqh questions that I could answer, inshallah, very, very quickly. Should we make wudu after changing diapers? Not to my knowledge, because this is not one of the legal things that break wudu itself. You can wash your hand. Can a woman sleep beside her husband during menses? Most definitely. This is one big difference between Islam and the provision in the book of Leviticus in the Bible. This is a big difference. Prophet ﷺ used to put his head in the lap of Aisha during her period and recite Quran. There is no problem at all with that. There is no hang-up. The only thing to avoid, of course, is the intimate not all intimate, even the intimate relationship which are in the normal cases, even if he hugs or kisses his wife, short of actual matrimonial relationship, it is even permissible. Wearing of nail polish, does it affect wudu? Well, if you have wudu and put nail polish, your wudu is not invalidated. But if you have nail polish and make wudu, your wudu is not complete, because the water should reach the compulsory organ of wudu, which include the nails. So you have to remove it, make wudu, and put it again if you like. Yeah, if you do wudu and put it, your wudu is not broken, no problem. But your next wudu, you have to remove it, because to make wudu, you have to get the water. So if you feel it's too tiring, maybe you might dispose with that and use henna instead or something. During pregnancy, sometimes there is secretion. Does that mean we have to change underwear and make wudu every time? Well, the secretion, if it's not blood in itself, does not constitute najasa, uncleanness. However, it would be definitely better and more cautious for the prayers, maybe to use some sort of a pad, like light pad, and maybe get rid of that pad or change underwear just by way of precaution. But I would have no evidence to say that this is an absolute requirement, because this is not the same like the menses, for example. Is in Islam, are women to wash her hair after she had sex with her husband? Well, both sexes must have ghusl or bath after having a matrimonial relationship. In the case of women, however, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been so kind to them, as Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained, that she does not have to undo her beads, if she had beads, for example, but she has to make sure that she take at least 3 handfuls of water, put it over the head and try to rub it so that the water reaches the root of the hair. But she does not have to undo her braids if she finds that this is inconvenient to her. But that's part of the requirement of ghusl. Just 3 handfuls of water would do it.
Assalamu alaikum. Just before I ask my question, one of my sisters wanted me to just mention that with polygamy, there has to be a good reason for marrying a second wife. You can't just marry, well, there has to be a good reason for it that she wanted me to mention. Maybe you would like to comment more on that. My question is actually, I hope people won't mind me bringing up, I hope people won't mind me bringing up this topic, but I'm concerned about what the Islamic jurisdiction is on female circumcision, because there are a lot of shows I've been seeing on French channels nowadays that I've seen Muslim women sort of defending this, female circumcision, and saying that, this is Islamic and we don't have to discuss it, and all these other, non-Muslim women saying, well, trying to, debate the topic, and I'm not sure exactly what Islam's perspective is on it, so I was wondering if you could comment on it.
First question related to the polygamy, I don't think Brother Jamal was advocating it. Brother Jamal was simply mentioning that...
one wife for almost 30 years now. I have no other intentions.
It's very important to remember that there are many rules that have to be observed. One that is that people, if a person is marrying more than one wife, then he should deal and he should treat both of them equally. And there are certainly situations here, especially in the United States, unless the law changes, I think that equal treatment is not possible, because the first wife will be considered as the legal wife, the other wife is not considered as a legal wife, so this is not equality. And unless people do that and change this thing, one has to understand this thing, that having the second wife in this situation is not fair, neither for the first wife nor for the second wife, especially for the second wife. So I certainly say that one has to consider that very carefully, because in many cases the second wife is going to suffer and her children are going to suffer, and this matter is serious matter. So one should not talk about that unless one has done some other work in changing the legislation on this topic. The second question was about the female circumcision. The female circumcision was a habit, was a urf, was a custom of some tribes in Arabia as well as in some parts of Africa. There is no hadith recommending it. It is not the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, but the male circumcision is the sunnah. And it is called khisal al-fitra. Some of the things that part of the fitra, that is the nature, the natural cleanliness. But the female circumcision is not that way. It is not prohibited. Prophet ﷺ did not prohibit it, but again it is not recommended as well. And so it existed among some tribes, it existed in some areas, and sometimes this led even to some harm, physical harm to women, and certainly that is not right, and that is doing it in such a way that even depriving her of her own rights in her married life. Those things are that is important, that it should be avoided, and it will be haram to do something in that way. And so those customs sometimes led to wrong practices, mispractices, and this has nothing to do with Islam. Islam will not agree with that.
We have a follow-up question on polygamy, which is the permission of the first wife required for the second marriage? Yeah, according to Islam, obviously.
The permission of the first wife is not required, but it is good to, because amruhum shura bainahum, that is, whenever they do things, they should discuss among themselves, and the consultation is important. So consultation is important. They should have consultation and should try to explain to her what are the reason why he's doing that. But it is not a requirement. Suppose somebody got married, had second wife, without consulting or without taking permission from his first wife, he is not committing adultery. He will not be punished for adultery.
We'll take a written question, which I give
Okay. One or two? Two?
Quickly, though.
Quickly, yeah, I know.
Because we have actually 5 minutes left to the session. If you want, we can extend slightly longer, because the next session in the main hall isn't until 4:45, and so we can extend another 15 minutes if you want to stay.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay, then we'll do that.
Okay. First of all, it says, explain the hadith that says many women will be in the hellfire. Or أكثركن. Well, I think we have to understand that hadith in a way that does not contradict the Quran, does not contradict other sound hadith, and also in the context of exhortation. And usually the language of exhortation should not be taken blindly in a literal manner at all. First of all, the Prophet ﷺ never said women will be the majority. He was addressing the number, a specific group of women of Ansar, who, by the way, were known to be a little bit feminist. By the way, there have been some complaint about their attitude, feminist attitude. There is a record on that in history. Secondly, does that really mean that being a female itself qualifies the person for that warm place, awfully warm place? The answer to that is definitely not. Because the Quran clearly said that whoever does good deeds, male or female, Allah will give them their abundant reward. So how do we understand it? We understand it in the light of similar ahadith, where the Prophet ﷺ say, I looked into the hellfire and I found the majority are, or many are rich, and I looked in the paradise, I find many that are poor. Does that mean that poverty qualifies you for paradise? Richness take you to the hellfire? There were many good Sahaba who were rich, like Abu Bakr and Abdurrahman ibn Auf and Uthman. Doesn't mean that at all. Which means then, it not to be taken literally, blindly like that, in terms of majority, more than 50% or whatever. But it simply warns people against certain acts that could lead to the hellfire. Not every poor will go to paradise, but a poor who's patient will go to paradise. It doesn't mean that every rich person will be going to the hellfire. No, but it warns that richness could beguile you away from the way of Allah and lead you to greed and haram, that you could be punished in the hellfire. By the same token, when the woman asked the Prophet ﷺ, why is that? He spoke about certain evil characters in some women, like being ungrateful to their husband, cursing too much and so on. It does not mean literally that this is the only reason we go to hellfire, but to say that these things could lead to the hellfire. One final remark. You have to understand it also in the context of one ayah in the Quran that says every sin will be forgiven except shirk in Allah, which means again that it is an exhortation language. It does not mean you'll spend all your life in hellfire because number one, you're female, number two, you're bad to your husband. It simply warns people against evil deeds. It should not be taken in the literal sense. The other question, I don't know if there's time for that. I'll tell you, if I don't get time for that other question, watch for the ISNA vision, and they plan, inshallah, in the evening to have a 2 minutes, 4-second answer to the question as to whether Islam sanctions hitting a woman. So instead of repeating the answer, maybe you can accommodate other questions. It's 2 minutes, but just make sure to be there. And if you have other questions on the same topic, see me, please, and we'll try to discuss it more.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
I'm from India, and this I think might be more effective to the people from India and Pakistan. I don't know how it affects the other Muslims from the other parts of the world, but over there, when the girl gets married, they pretty much take her away from her home, and she becomes more or less the property of the in-laws and the husband. And starting from day one, she starts living in a feeling of hostility because she feels like she has just left everything behind, and her husband at first expects her to be very good to her in-laws, and puts all these, suddenly she has to adopt this home where she's, instead of starting to get to know them and develop love and things like that, she just has all these things put on to her, and she has to do these things. A lot of Indians and Pakistanis who came to America since 25 years ago, they have lived under this suppression and done what a good wife or a good daughter-in-law will do. But now what's happening is, with the freedom movement of United States and the surrounding things, and the children are big, and they have gone away to colleges, they're coming free of it, and it's causing a lot of problems in a lot of marriages, coming to the point where they're almost getting divorced and are getting divorced. The men are becoming very lonely. Also, in the same thing is where the in-laws, the girl's parents, they will live only with the son. They do not live with the daughter. Can you tell us how much of this is Islamic and how much of this is cultural? If it is, if it is Islamic, then maybe the women can try a little harder to adjust to it. But if it is not, maybe they can put their foot down and try and change this, because it'll save a lot of marriages and a lot of people and happiness in a lot of homes.
Well, most of it is cultural, most of it is not Islamic. I mean, to have all of these things that is the parent must live with the son and they cannot live with their daughter. There's no prohibition as such. They can live wherever they want, and actually the daughters have as much responsibility to take care of her parent as the son has the responsibility to take care. But at the same time, you have to remember that once she is married, basic financial maintenance is upon her husband. So because of that, parents may feel more comfortable. That is because their son is providing for the family, he will also provide for them. And for this reason, very often parents prefer to be with their son's family rather than with their daughter's family. But there is no prohibition as such, as long as, and I think it's very important, especially in this context in which we are living, and we are out of those cultural milieu in which Muslim families were living in India and Pakistan, in that area. Now we are out. It is very important that the family should be counseled on this. The counseling is very important. Very often families have moved here but is still living in the same kind of cultural feelings. So those cultural feelings should be taken out and proper counseling has to be given. But from the Islamic point of view, it is the son and daughter, both of them, they should care for each other. The daughter, after the marriage, she is not deprived from her parent. Actually, she has acquired another home, but at the same time, she is married to a person. That person has also become part of this family, her family, and she has become part of his family. And there should be a mutual relationship. There should be an understanding between the two. The boy has to be counseled on that, the girl has to be counseled on that, and the parent have to be counseled on that. So there is a better understanding between all of them. There is no hard and fast rule as far as Islam is concerned. It doesn't say that now she has nothing to do with her parent. And all of this rukhsati, the poetry that goes without that, and the crying and weeping and all those things, these are all just cultural things. It has nothing to do with the Islamic rules as such.
What if the wife is earning also and the parents don't have any sons? I just want to continue with, this thing. If I'm just
for one question.
I think Dr. Jamal answered that question about the wife's earning. You have a right to your own earnings, and you can give it to...
But what if they don't have any son? If the parents don't have any sons, where do they go and live when they get old? Suppose the daughter...
Sister, I'm sorry.
Okay.
We have many questions.
All right, okay. All right.
Okay, two related questions about women or sisters who said that they are alone, they are divorced or single, and some people say, is it haram for them to stay here if they are alone? The answer is no. There is no requirement for you to get married. It is desirable for a Muslim woman to get married, but there is no sin on her if she's not able to find a husband. And like the sister who said that she's alone here, her parents even are not here. No, it's not haram to stay, but she should try her best, inshallah, to live and conduct an Islamic life and to live with other trusted women so as to protect herself. Two other quick questions. It says, is it permissible to cut the hair, for women to cut their hair? There is no text in the Quran and Sunnah that says women cannot cut their hair. There are texts that women should not imitate men, and if she cuts her hair just to imitate boys, then of course it is not for cutting the hair in itself, but for imitation. But if a woman wants to trim her hair in some way or the other, there is nothing haram about it that I know of. And the final one here, at least in this batch, if a woman has a bladder problem, what can she do to keep clean? The same question applies to men. And again, I remind my dear sisters, there is nothing called women issue except only the issues that pertain to tahara and menstruation. All other issues are men's issues as well. And even the issue of menstruation is men's issue, because man should also learn when to approach his wife. Let's not divide it in that feministic way, simplistic way. There is no issue which is purely women or man. Both men and women should learn about it. And the same rule applies to men and women equally in that case. This is known as al-ma'zur, wudu al-ma'zur, which means a person who cannot control the bladder, man or woman. What they have to do is every prayer they have to clean themselves, make a new wudu. Even if something comes out during the prayer, they don't have to worry about it. They just make a fresh wudu for every prayer. And one more. It says, I have been told that, maybe you can... If you read it, just summarize it, that's quicker.
They're asking about gemstones, particular sapphires, and if stones can harm your personality.
No. Stones, to my knowledge, does not harm your personality. The only stone that may harm are the stones used by Palestinian boys.
I'd like to go to the stand and then we'll take 4 minute questions.
Yes, we have questions related to abortion. What does Islam say about abortion? Abortion in general is forbidden in Islam. Once the pregnancy has taken place, one should not do the abortion. There are certain situations in which abortion might be considered. If there is a danger to the life of the mother, then it will be considered. It will be certainly the life of the mother is to be protected, because that is the asl, that is the basic life, and the other life is related and contingent upon the basic life. So the life of the mother has to be protected, and for this reason abortion will be allowed. There is some other consideration is given in the situation of rape. Then in that case some people have suggested, but also some fuqaha have given the time, it should be within 120 days. If it is within 120 days, then abortion will be allowed. Otherwise, the general position is once the pregnancy has taken place, abortion should be avoided. Abortion should not be done. There are other questions related to transplant and organ donation and surrogate motherhood. Again, these questions will take a long time. But to give a brief answer on that, that is, the organ donation is permissible in Islam. And again, donation, not sale. This is very important to remember that, because I was reading just a few days ago an article that there are companies that are buying from the poor countries. They're buying kidneys. Actually, there is a place in some poor countries, in Bangladesh, in India, where they are giving attractive sum of money to the people, and people are selling their eyes. And this is wrong. This is very inhuman. This is very cruel, to take advantage of people's poverty and take parts of their body because of that. So in Islam, organ donation, only donation, it is okay, but not purchase, not sell. Do not sell the parts of the body, and that will not be done. Again, the same thing is also about the blood. Even the blood should not be sold. One should not sell it, but one can donate it. Okay. Even after death, one cannot sell. The relatives should not sell the organs, but the relatives they can donate. And if a person, of course, has given his consent to that, so if the consent of the person is necessary, and in that situation, the parts can be taken. And transplant is important. It's a very important development in medicine, and it helps a lot of people. So it is good to donate. It's a very beneficial thing, and there will be a great reward. For example, there are a lot of people who have the eye problem, and with this retina transplant, it can be a lot of people can be cured, and they can remove that. If a person dies, immediately after that they remove that retina, and then they can transplant it to others. This is a very good thing. There is nothing wrong in that. And Fuqaha, the Academy of Islamic Jurisprudence, they had their meeting, and most of the Fuqaha have agreed that this is acceptable.
Research. For research purpose.
For research purpose, yes, the same thing also. For research purpose or for the medical reason, for giving it to other person. Surrogate motherhood. Surrogate motherhood, there is, if somebody, there is the test tube baby situation, that is okay. If say husband and wife, husband cannot make his wife pregnant, and through some artificial insemination, the semen can be put into her, or from both of them can be taken, and then the fertilization takes place outside in the tube, then it is permissible if it is between the married couples. But outside marriage, that is fertilization takes place for one couple and then put that into the womb of another woman, that is not permissible, because a woman should not be carrying the fertilized ovum of another couple or another person. So because these things are related to marriage, and the hifz al-ansab, the protection of the lineage, is one of the very important rules of the Sharia, and it must be observed. So for this reason, surrogate motherhood is not acceptable in Islam.
We'll have to be very brief, inshallah, because we only have a few minutes left.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm a fast talker. Given that if a husband and wife are both medically capable of producing children, at what length of time can a husband ask for a divorce or second wife if the first wife has not been able to become pregnant? And so how long, is there a length of time? Is it his right to say 1 year you can't, so then I want a second wife or a divorce? And likewise, if it's just a girl and the husband wants more than one, or a boy, does he have a right to divorce or take a second wife?
There is no requirement that I know of. Even if a person has a wife who is barren, there is no legal Islamic requirement on him either to divorce her or to marry another woman to get the children. If they're happy, alhamdulillah, Allah bless them. As far as the ultimatum, unless you produce a baby or a boy or girl, I'm going to marry another woman, that's totally alien to the spirit of Islam. Yes, maybe. Exactly. Well, Allah, like the brother Muzammil reminded, Allah says in the Quran, as Allah gives boys to some, girls to some, or both, or make a woman barren, it is the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there is no requirement and there is no question of ultimatum. Yet, I must say in honesty also, that some of the reasons that some jurists reflected upon as to why did Allah possibly permitted polygamy, they said a man, for example, who is very eager to have children of his own, blood children, and his wife is barren, that this might be one of the possible good reasons for him, but it doesn't mean that he has to do it. I have another batch of questions. You want me to go to them very quickly? One, what kind of condition can a woman include in her marital contract And two examples are given: the right of divorce and the question of polygamy. Right of divorce, there is no dispute that I know of. In other words, that a woman could ask that the isma, or the right of divorce on her part, unilaterally be in her hand. As far as the requirement that the husband will not marry another woman or will not leave that particular country or state or whatnot, there is difference of opinion. Some jurists say that this condition is void because it makes haram or unlawful things that Allah made halal. Other jurists are more inclined to the second opinion, that this is not so. It does not make it haram. It means that you voluntarily give up a permissible thing. So if I tell my wife, all right, I agree that I not have polygamy, I'm making a commitment, not I'm making it haram, I'm simply saying I voluntarily give up that concession which is there in the Quran. Having spoken about marriage, let's shift to divorce, which is next. No, okay, before that, marital life. A question is about the duties in the household of the husband, physically and financially. If he's neglecting that, what can the wife leave him? Well, if the husband is not fulfilling his duty physically and or financially, or mistreating or abusing his wife, these are all causes, legitimate causes in Islamic Sharia for a woman to seek divorce. By seeking divorce through a properly constituted court of Islamic law, or substitute in this country like an imam or council of imams or council of reconciliation, if the problem cannot be solved, of course, is legitimate, is a legitimate cause if it is verified, which means that she would be entitled with all her right as a divorced woman, including the delayed part of marital gift, the complete support during the waiting period, and whatever other right for a divorced woman. That's in the case as described. I don't want just to elaborate more than what the question is asking. But there is another question that touched on another point. It says, suppose a wife is suffering under a husband, he does not let her go to the mosque, does not let her visit people, and his excuse that, did you ever go to the mosque in Pakistan or India? And this is an excuse that she could not go to the masjid. And if she's not happy in that marriage, what can she do? Well, first of all, I would abstain from saying, all right, divorce him or seek divorce. Whenever there is marital problems, the Prophet ﷺ taught that one should first try to make reconciliation and be patient. It's quite possible that that brother may think that the practice in Egypt or Pakistan or whatever, because it's an Islamic country, is Islam. And we have to re-educate, we have to unlearn the wrong type of information and get the right kind of information. We have to teach them that what women are doing in Egypt or Pakistan or whatnot is not necessarily what the Prophet ﷺ did, and this is our model, number one. And the women at the time of the Prophet went to the masjid. That's the evidence that we have. So we have to educate and change attitudes. If things doesn't work out and the woman is really very miserable and all reconciliation efforts fail, she can seek divorce للضرر, because this is also unreasonable treatment, which a good Muslim judge could verify and rule accordingly. Or she could also seek khul', divestiture, in which case she can give up her rights in terms of delayed part of dowry or whatever gift he gave her, and that is also a legitimate, even if the husband doesn't want to give her divorce. And this is the end for now.
I'm sorry, I think we have to end now. There are a lot of good questions that weren't answered, and there are people waiting at the mic. I'm sorry about that.
And I hope,
encourage you, all of you, to seek out the brothers during meal times, in between sessions, and not just these brothers, sisters, and other brothers who are knowledgeable.
I just have one remark to make, if I may. Just a very quick one. I really sincerely pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that in our Muslim ummah, I'm not saying that for any reason, that in our Muslim ummah, inshallah, there will be more and more articulate and learned Muslim women, that they will only lecture to women, but come also and lecture to men. And I hope when some sister come to lecture to men, they will not feel unwelcomed or hear any unwelcome remark, but they would be most welcome and listen to, inshallah.
And there's a couple of announcements. The main session is going to start in 15 minutes. That's development
Yes.
in the Muslim world. And also there's going to be a meeting for sisters.
If it is not needed, we should avoid it because this is unnecessary desecration of the body. In some cases, it's legally required, like in the case of a crime, or in some maslaha in Sharia, like, for example, discovering the cause of the new disease in order, but to be done judiciously in the most limited way rather than just keep opening and doing it to the minimum needed, inshallah.
Oh, there she is.
Okay. Yes. I understand that a council of scholars recently decided that if the person is judged to be brain dead, either there have been disputes as to whether death is in the heart or brain, but brain death is very clear because you can keep bumping the blood, but it doesn't really make it because it's irrevocable. There's no chance that there is nothing wrong of not using or unhooking the life support system. Because there is no, it's not wrong, provided again, like I said, the expert, the medical doctors say that the brain is dead, so that there is no chance that the person would live. It's not like a coma that a person might come out, that is dead, really dead. Then there is no need. In that case, there is nothing wrong, they say. Actually, it might be more painful to continue this.